The number 62 is not a milestone. It does not glow. It just sits there like a porch board that never stops creaking. I woke before sunrise, the way I always do, and let the quiet of my apartment in Austin press against me. Coffee first, newspaper folded to the crossword, the ceiling fan whispering above. From my balcony, I could see morning light polishing the roofs across the street, a food truck hitch rumbling awake, a runner shuffling past with earbuds in and head down. 4 years without a call from my daughter, and yet habit still made me glance at the phone. Claire used to text me a picture of the sky when the day looked pretty. Then she stopped. Grief does not holler. It settles. It becomes the shape of your chair, the anchor of your evenings, the new order of your pantry, because there is no one to complain when you place the tea next to the flour. I made my coffee too strong and drank it anyway. I tried the crossword and gave up at the first clue. I told myself I would water the basil on the windowsill before the heat rolled in. I told myself I would take a walk around the block and wave at the neighbor who never waves back. I told myself many simple things I could finish. That is the trick to living alone. The knock came once, then footsteps fading down the hall. Not the double tap of the delivery man who likes to chat. A single decision. Done. On the mat sat a rectangle of brown paper tied with a thin blue ribbon. The handwriting on the label took the air out of my lungs. Precise letters, confident spacing, no wasted curves. Claire had always written like that, even on grocery lists. I had not seen her hand in years, but my body recognized it before my mind did. I did not open the box. I carried it to the kitchen table and set it down like it might startle. I reheated my coffee and watched the microwave turn its slow circle. A card slid half out from the ribbon when I lifted the package, just enough to show the first word, Mom. I sat. I smoothed the ribbon back into place. The fan ticked. A siren murmured somewhere far away on I-35. I told myself to breathe. After a while, I took a clean jar from the cabinet and set it beside the box, not because I knew what would be inside, but because preparation felt like a kind of courage. I wanted hope, but I trusted caution more than my heartbeat that morning instead. I let the box sit there until the coffee turned cold again. When I finally untied the ribbon, the paper gave way with a soft tear, like skin surrendering. Inside was a polished wooden box, dark oak, smooth as glass. I lifted the lid carefully, expecting anything but what I found. Chocolates, dozens of them, each one different, each one deliberate. Glossy domes marbled with gold, squares dusted with lavender sugar, hearts streaked with pale blue. They looked like something from a Paris boutique, not the hands of my estranged daughter. Claire had never so much as baked a muffin. On the underside of the lid, taped neatly, was a small cream-colored card. In the same rigid handwriting were the words, "Happy birthday, Mom. Maybe we can begin again." I held the card longer than I should have. My throat ached in that way it does when you want to cry, but refuse to give the feeling space. Begin again. It was the first olive branch in years, and yet it landed heavy. I thought of all the moments she had left me out of. My pneumonia, my sister's funeral, holidays gone silent. Could a box of sweetness cover that silence? I closed the lid and pressed my palms against the wood. Part of me wanted to taste one, to believe in the message. Another part whispered, not yet, not safe. I reached for the jar I had placed earlier, lifted one chocolate, round, dusted with gold flecks, and slipped it inside. I sealed the lid tight and set it in the fridge. Insurance, I told myself. The rest of the chocolates I rewrapped with the same care Claire had used. My hands shook slightly, but I steadied them. I thought of Evelyn, my neighbor 2 doors down, who had brought me soup when I caught the flu last winter. She had always had a soft spot for sweets. By late afternoon, the Austin sun had dropped just enough to soften the light, that kind of orange haze that turns brick walls into something almost tender. I walked the box to Evelyn's apartment. Her wind chimes trembled in the breeze when she opened the door. "For me?" she asked, startled. "Someone sent them," I said with a smile. "Too many for one person." She tried to decline, but I pressed the box into her hands. You'll enjoy them more than I will, I told her. She finally accepted, touched by the gesture, and I felt an odd relief in passing them on. Back in my apartment, the kitchen table was bare again, except for the faint ring where the box had been. I tried not to look at it too long. Giving them away felt easier than wondering what they meant. Still, when I opened the fridge and saw that single chocolate waiting in its jar, my stomach tightened. A reminder, quiet but insistent, that I hadn't decided whether this was a gift of love or something else entirely. The phone rang the next morning while I was pouring my second cup of coffee. The sound startled me more than it should have. Most mornings passed without interruption. Few people had reason to call, and even fewer used that number anymore. I set the mug down quickly, hot liquid splashing against my hand, because on the screen glowed a name I had not seen in 4 years: Claire. For a heartbeat, I thought about letting it ring out. I wanted to. My hand hovered, heavy as stone. But habit, or maybe longing, pushed me to swipe the screen. "Hello," I said, voice too quiet. "Hi, Mom." Her tone was smooth, casual, as if no time had passed, as if silence had not stretched between us long enough to choke. "Happy birthday. I know I'm late." I sat down at the kitchen table, gripping the mug with both hands, though I no longer wanted the coffee. "I got your package," I said. There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Yeah? I wasn't sure you'd open it. Honestly, I wasn't sure you'd even keep it." I did, I admitted. It was unexpected. The line went quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing, steady but a little shallow, like she was choosing each word. Then she asked, too lightly, "So how were they?" "The chocolates." "Yeah." I took a long breath, staring at the refrigerator where the jar held that single gold-flecked piece. The truth pressed against my throat, sharp. "I didn't eat them," I said slowly. "I gave them to Evelyn next door." The silence that followed was so absolute, I pulled the phone away to check if the call had dropped. It hadn't. "You gave them to Evelyn?" Her voice had changed. No warmth now. It had a sharp edge, like glass catching light. "Yes," I said, cautious. "She's always loved sweets, and I didn't know what to do with them." Her breathing shifted, uneven, tight. Then, with sudden force, she hissed, "You did what?" I flinched. "Claire, what's wrong?" "They weren't for her," she snapped. Her voice cracked, not with sadness, but something darker, frustration wrapped in panic. "They were for you, only you." The words hit like a slap. My chest clenched. I didn't know," I whispered. "Right," she spat. "Of course you didn't. You never do." The bitterness bled through every syllable, thick and choking. And before I could find words to bridge the distance, she hung up. I sat frozen, phone still against my ear, listening to the empty hum of the dial tone. My hands trembled around the mug. Coffee gone cold again. "Only you." That was what she said. Only me. And for the first time, I wished I had never opened that package at all. The phone rang again the following afternoon. This time the old landline I barely used anymore. I almost ignored it, but something in the shrill insistence pulled me across the room. When I lifted the receiver, a young man's voice tumbled through, rushed and brittle. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Daniel, Evelyn's son. I'm sorry to bother you, but it's my mom. She's in the hospital." My knees gave a quiet buckle, and I slid onto the hallway bench. "Hospital? What happened?" "She collapsed this morning," he said, his voice breaking around the words. "Severe vomiting, disoriented, couldn't stand. They admitted her to St. David's. They're still running tests. The doctors can't find the cause yet." My mouth went dry. "Did she eat anything unusual?" There was a pause, just long enough for dread to bloom. "She mentioned chocolates, said you brought them by. Did you?" I pressed a hand over my mouth, as if that could push the truth back inside. Yes, I did." Daniel exhaled sharply. "The doctors are asking for a timeline. I'll let them know." "Thank you." He hung up before I could explain further. I stayed on the bench, long after the line went dead, the receiver limp in my hand. The apartment was quiet, except for the thud of my heartbeat, thick and punishing. Evelyn, my kind neighbor, the one person who still checked on me, now fighting for her life. I stumbled into the kitchen. The table was bare except for the faint imprint where the wooden box had sat. My eyes swept the room, searching for something, anything that could make sense. That was when I noticed the trash can. I bent down, pulling the bag open with trembling fingers. Near the bottom lay a small plastic vial, no label, just a thin dusting of white powder clinging to the inside. I pulled it out carefully, holding it up to the light. The cap was screwed tight, but my stomach twisted. It wasn't mine. I had never seen it before. I set it on the counter next to the refrigerator, then opened the fridge door. The jar still sat there, one perfect chocolate sealed inside, its gold flecks catching the dim light. My hands shook as I touched it. I had saved it without knowing why, a token of caution or instinct. Now it stared back at me like an accusation. Was it meant for me? Was I the target? The questions swirled, too sharp to hold. I closed the fridge and leaned against the counter, the vial and the chocolate side by side. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing closer, the air too thin. Evelyn was in the hospital, and I could not shake the thought that I had delivered her there with my own hands. That night I barely slept. The ceiling fan spun slow circles above me, the rhythm taunting, while my mind replayed Evelyn's face when I handed her the chocolates. I could almost hear her laugh again, the gentle way she always said thank you like she meant it. Now she lay in a hospital bed because of me. By dawn, I had made my decision. There was one person I could trust, Dr. Jordan, an old friend from years ago when I worked at the high school library. He had moved on to run a private lab on the north side of Austin. We hadn't spoken in months, but he once told me, if you ever need a favor, something quiet, I'll help. I clung to that. I called him just after sunrise. His voice was groggy but alert, the way professionals snap awake when they sense urgency. I told him I had something I needed tested. I didn't explain much, only that it was food and that it could not go through official channels yet. He didn't press. Meet me at the back entrance, he said. Bring it sealed. I'll make time. An hour later, I sat in my car in his parking lot, the jar heavy in my lap. It felt wrong, bringing something from my daughter to a lab like evidence, but fear outweighed sentiment. I handed it over without ceremony, my hand brushing his glove, as if passing contraband. What am I looking for? He asked. Just anything unusual, I said. Anything dangerous. He studied my face for a moment, but didn't ask more. He nodded and disappeared inside. I stayed in the car with the engine running, unable to drive away. My hands curled tight around the steering wheel, the leather slick beneath my palms. The minutes dragged like hours. With every tick of the clock, old memories surfaced uninvited. Claire at 5, lining up her crayons in perfect rainbow order and screaming if one went missing. Claire at 12, refusing to eat at a friend's birthday because she didn't trust the frosting. Claire at 16, furious with me for choosing a second-hand prom dress instead of the expensive one she wanted. Back then, I called it stubbornness. Now I wondered if it had always been something colder, sharper, waiting for the right edge to cut. The call finally came just after noon. Jordan's voice was quieter than before. "Margaret," he said, "I need you to listen carefully." We ran the standard panels, then deeper screens. There are traces of aconite, wolfsbane, highly toxic, definitely not accidental. My stomach dropped. "You're sure?" "As sure as science gets." Whoever made that chocolate laced it deliberately. The line buzzed in my ear. My daughter had sent me poison, wrapped in ribbon, disguised as love, and I had almost eaten it. Dr. Jordan didn't leave me much choice. "I can't sit on results like this," he told me. "It's not just about you, Margaret. If someone is willing to use aconite, they could try again, or worse." His voice was steady, but I heard the weight in it. He promised he would discreetly alert the right contact at the Austin Police Department. By the next morning, I was sitting in a small office tucked behind the downtown precinct, hands folded tightly in my lap. The walls were plain, the fluorescent lights too harsh, but the woman across from me had sharp eyes softened by something almost kind. "I'm Detective Angela Ruiz," she said, sliding a notepad onto the desk. Dr. Jordan passed along the toxicology results. "Thank you for coming in." I nodded, though my throat felt sandpaper dry. On the desk sat a clear evidence bag, the chocolate jar inside. Next to it, the small plastic vial I had found in my trash. Seeing them under official light made my stomach twist. Ruiz started gently, asking when the package arrived, what it looked like, whether I recognized the handwriting. I answered each question carefully, avoiding the storm of emotion pressing at the back of my eyes. She didn't interrupt, only scribbled in neat lines across her notepad. Then came the harder question. "Do you believe your daughter intended to harm you?" The words landed like a weight on my chest. I stared at my hands, the skin lined with years, the nails digging into the tissue I hadn't realized I was twisting. Every instinct screamed to protect Claire, to excuse her, to call it a mistake. But Evelyn's face in a hospital bed flashed behind my eyelids, and the bitter snap of Claire's voice echoed. "They were for you, only you." My voice cracked when I answered. "I don't want to believe it, but yes, I think she did." Ruiz didn't gloat. She simply nodded, as though she had already expected it. "Has there been tension between you before? Financial disagreements? Family conflicts?" I let out a short, broken laugh. "She resents me. Always has. She says I ruined her chances, that I held her back. I raised her alone after her father died. I did the best I could, but it was never enough." Ruiz studied me quietly. I could almost hear the space between her questions, filling with unspoken doubts. All I had was a poisoned chocolate, a plastic vial, and a feeling that sat too deep in my gut to ignore. Finally, she leaned forward. "Would you be willing to let us open a formal case? Submit these items as evidence. It will mean an investigation. Possibly an arrest." I swallowed hard, my mouth bitter with guilt. Betraying my daughter felt like cutting out my own heart. But then I thought of Evelyn lying in the hospital, and of the ribbon around that deadly gift. "Yet," I whispered, "do what you have to do." The decision weighed on me for days, but in the end I knew I couldn't sit still and wait for detectives to build a case from scraps. Claire had always been careful, calculating. If she sensed the walls closing in, she would vanish behind excuses. I needed to see her face. I needed to hear her slip. So I drove across Austin on a gray Thursday afternoon, the jar of uneaten chocolate left with the police. But my phone tucked in my coat pocket already recording. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I told myself this wasn't a visit as a mother. This was survival. Claire lived in a modern condo complex near Lady Bird Lake. Glass walls and concrete balconies stacked like shoeboxes. She opened the door with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," she said, stepping aside. "This is a surprise." "I heard about Evelyn," I answered, voice calm, though my pulse hammered. "I wanted to check in." She shrugged. "She's still at St. David's. Leia's with her most of the time. They think it's some kind of virus." I nodded as if I believed it, and followed her into the kitchen. The place was spotless, like always. Counters gleamed, knives lined up at perfect angles, every detail too precise. "I'm sorry we didn't talk more the other day," I said lightly. "The chocolates were lovely." Her eyes flicked toward me. "Were they?" "I didn't try them myself," I lied smoothly. "Evelyn enjoyed them. She said the heart-shaped one was her favorite." There it was, a flicker. Barely a pause, but enough. Claire's lips parted, then pressed together. Her voice dropped a notch, soft but pointed. "Funny, Evelyn always did prefer the lavender ones." I hadn't said lavender. The silence between us thickened. She turned to rinse a glass that didn't need rinsing. Her spine stiffened. "You've picked up a new hobby," I said, forcing my tone casual. "Never knew you were into baking." Her laugh was short, brittle. "Good way to unwind." "Better than crossword puzzles, right?" I leaned against the counter, steadying my breath. Where'd you learn about aconite? She froze, not dramatically, just a small shift, her shoulders too still. The glass paused midair. When she spoke, her voice was clipped. I don't know what that is. Dr. Jordan does, I replied quietly. And the test showed it in the chocolate. Her jaw tightened. She set the glass down with exaggerated care. Accusations like that don't end well, Mom. Not without proof. I met her eyes. You already gave me proof. Her stare lingered on me, unreadable, but I caught the flicker of calculation behind it. Something cold, something I had never wanted to admit, lived in my daughter's face. I left soon after, my phone still recording, my heart thudding like a drum. By the time I reached my car, I had sent the audio file to Detective Ruiz. For the first time in years, I didn't cry for Claire. I shook instead, with the awful certainty that I finally understood her. Detective Ruiz called me 2 mornings later. Her tone was clipped but steady. The audio, combined with the toxicology and Evelyn's medical report, is enough. We've secured a warrant. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the faint circle left behind by the wooden box, and nodded even though she couldn't see me. What happens now? We'll bring her in today, Ruiz said. You don't need to be there, and I wasn't. I spent the afternoon pacing my apartment, blinds half closed against the Austin sunlight, the silence of the rooms pressing tight around me. When the phone finally buzzed again, Ruiz confirmed it was done. Claire hadn't fought. She hadn't shouted. She went quietly, composed, like she'd rehearsed the moment all along. I didn't know whether to feel grief or relief. Evelyn's recovery was slow but steady. A week later, she opened her eyes fully, and her son called me from the hospital with tears in his voice. When I visited, she looked fragile, but her hand squeezed mine with surprising strength. Don't blame yourself, she whispered. I wanted to argue, but the truth was tangled. My guilt would not vanish simply because she survived. Laya came to my apartment a few days after the arrest. Her eyes were red, her hands twisting a tissue until it shredded. She confessed she had noticed strange behaviors, jars of dried plants tucked away, notebooks filled with formulas she didn't understand. She thought it was just Claire's way of coping with stress. Now she realized it had been practice, study, maybe even obsession. I listened, letting her words pour out, until she collapsed into tears at my kitchen table. I held her hand and wondered how many of us had ignored the signs because we wanted to believe love could outshine danger. One quiet Tuesday morning, Detective Ruiz returned the evidence I had chosen to keep. A sealed bag with a single chocolate inside, dulled now, its gold flecks faded. She handed it over gently. Not for revenge, she said, for clarity. I placed the bag in a small fireproof box, alongside the cream-colored card that had said, "Happy birthday, Mom. Maybe we can begin again." The irony weighed more than the chocolate itself. That night I turned off every light except the one in the hallway and sat in the stillness. I thought about the line between trust and blindness, between love and survival. The lesson was harsh but clear. Family does not guarantee safety. Affection does not erase intent. Trust must be earned, not assumed. I locked the box, slid it onto the highest shelf of the closet, and walked away. Not to forget, but to remember. Because survival, I realized, begins the moment you decide to see the truth for what it is, even when it comes wrapped in ribbon.